Welcome in. This is a segment from the Slumpbuster Fantasy Football Podcast with Aris Blakeney. Find the full episode on Spotify, iTunes, the Google Play Store, or our YouTube channel. Enjoy.
Why don't we start off with the Thursday night game? Great NFC West matchup. 1 point game. Vegas had this as a 1.5 point line. So again, kudos to Vegas for how they do these predictions. I'll never understand the math behind it, but they just apparently knew that Greg Zuerlein was going to miss a big 50-yard kick.
It's because they're the Illuminati.
They are the Illuminati. I'm pretty sure that they have their finger on the button, kind of like a Buffalo Wild Wings commercial, and just make all this madness that happens in the NFL season happen.
Turning on the sprinklers.
And turning on the sprinklers. Whatever it took to mess with Greg Delanc's momentum. But some of the big performances from the week, you had Russell Wilson, 268 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, 29.292 fantasy points. I bet most people thought that he would probably lead the quarterback position coming off this performance. But then Sunday happened. Other performances that game, Chris Carson, 118 yards, had the game-winning touchdown, almost dropped the game-winning touchdown.
That ball stayed in the air for I feel like 10 minutes.
Oh yeah, I think his heart dropped the second it bounced off his hands and he had to recatch it because I know every Seahawks fan, 12th man nation, I don't know how you must have been feeling in that moment, but
yeah, all the air left that stadium for 1 second.
Yeah, and certainly if you're a fantasy owner too, obviously that's a 6-point swing. So if you lost by points, I want you to remember that tip ball off Chris Carson's hand. Let's see. We had Tyler Lockett. He had a touchdown. DK Metcalf had a touchdown in this game. You know, Russell Wilson spreads the ball around pretty well. Will Dissly, his new favorite big blocking tight end, had 81 yards. Decent little waiver wire pickup. If Will Dissly's still hanging around, listen, you're not going to find much great at the tight end position, so definitely go grab him before he's gone. Todd Gurley, for all the theories about his demise, he's scored back-to-back weeks of 2 touchdowns, so at least he's gained what matters, those goal line carries. And then Gerald Everett, another big week. So again, if you're struggling in the tight end position, 7 receptions, 136 yards, back-to-back double-digit weeks for him.
Yeah, he might also be a streaming target next week, depending on the health of Brandon Cooks. He had another concussion, so he's going to be in that protocol all week. They'd be down 1 option, and bam, there comes Gerald Everett, who has a Gerald Everett game every so often. He was drafted to hopefully be Ertz and Kittle and Kelsey and all them, but he's not consistent enough, and I think that's just because they have a plethora of weapons around there that they can choose from. So.
Oh yeah, I mean the Rams, they run that 3 wide receiver set out, so they don't really need much from the tight end position. But now that they're down one of their stars, of Brandon Cooks, you're definitely gonna see Gerald Everett get some more targets than he would otherwise. Even Tyler Higbee too on the deeper league options, I would say. But anything more on the Thursday night game, Aris? I think we've covered everyone.
Yeah, I mean, DK Metcalf's probably going to be looked at on the waiver wire if he's still available. But I just don't like 3 targets, 4 targets a game. You just can't really rely on that. So yeah, I'd probably leave him there unless you're in a super deep league. I'd probably just leave him on the waiver.
I'll say this. We said that about Tyler Lockett all last year, 3-4 targets. But sometimes with Russell Wilson throwing the ball, magic happens. And let's see. So moving into this next game. So Buccaneers, they've been a bit of a surprising team the last few weeks, especially coming off that big 50-plus point victory against the Rams. And yet they went on the road again to face the Saints. Saints, again, coming off a big win against the Cowboys the previous week. They won this one 31-24. Garbage time touchdown at the end. Teddy Bridgewater, 4 passing touchdowns. 2 of them went to Michael Thomas on 11 receptions for 182 yards. So the first of our big wide receiver performances today. What do you make of the Saints side of things?
I like that it seems Teddy Bridgewater is actually starting to get comfortable in the offense. 4 touchdowns now. They have a good matchup again next week against Jacksonville. Then they go to Chicago, and then they have Arizona. So you're already down Drew Brees. You're coming into weeks where you're going to have multiple quarterbacks on bye. Teddy Bridgewater might be a streaming option, probably not against Chicago. I still tend to think Chicago is an elite defense, even though what happened in London, but hopefully it's just London, but Chicago would be coming off of a bye to face them. So I would look for Teddy Bridgewater to continue getting comfortable in this offense and growing. This is what they signed him to the richest backup contract for, was moments like these. So I like him, maybe as a streaming option going forward.
Yeah, speaking of next week's bye, so you mentioned as far as plugging and playing. So next week you're going to have Chicago in a bye. You're not trying to replace Chase Daniel, so I think you'll be fine on that regard. Buffalo, you're probably streaming anyway if you had Josh Allen. Indianapolis, Oakland, not really quarterbacks that you're relying on. Maybe Brissett, I would say, but Teddy Bridgewater, if he's out on waivers, you can definitely throw him into your lineup. He's not only good for replacing Drew Brees in the real life game, he's decent in replacing him if you lost him in your fantasy matchup or your fantasy leagues earlier in the year. Something to consider. Now, let's consider that you should probably stay away from that Tampa Bay backfield. So Ronald Jones, 35 yards on 9 carries. Peyton Barber on 32 yards on 8 carries. The Bucs run game, is this just a mess you just want to avoid altogether?
Yeah, and it seems like they're alternating touchdowns every week. So Peyton Barber had a touchdown today. Ronald Jones had a touchdown last week. The week before, I think it was Peyton Barber again. It's a committee backfield for fantasy purposes, committee backfields, unless it wasn't like Kamara and Ingram last year. They're volatile. You stay away from them. If they're not on an elite or offense, that's just stay away.
Stay away if your top wide receiver is also playing the Saints, because back-to-back weeks of Marshawn Lattimore shutting down wide receiver ones. This week it was Mike Evans who fell victim. 3 targets, 0 receptions, obviously 0 fantasy points from that. He did the same to Amari Cooper last week. If you see the Saints on your schedule, are you just completely avoiding it regardless? Name some wide receivers you would feel comfortable starting against the Saints at this point.
Probably if your best receiver plays out of the slot. Cornerbacks tend not to like to play out of the slot. That's why you're seeing this emergence of, slot cornerbacks as a specialty. So I would probably go, Cooper Kupp. Keenan Allen likes to play out of the slot quite a bit. Any of those slot, really good slot receivers, Edelman, Humphreys, I'd probably go with them, just because they don't really go outside to, Lattimore territory.
Okay, so basically just any of your top dominant outside receivers probably do not start, but as far as slot receivers, probably fine, and that makes sense. Even on the other side of the ball too, you have Eli Apple too covering that side. So the Saints have a decent little secondary altogether. So this might just be a situation you want to avoid. All right. Next matchup, we have the Vikings. They went on the road to face the Giants. There's definitely been a lot of buzz this week around that Vikings locker room as far as what to do with Kirk Cousins. And if there was ever a good get right kind of week, it was definitely going to be against the Giants secondary. Kirk Cousins drew for 306 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and those 2 touchdowns, they went to Adam Thielen. So Adam Thielen, squeaky wheel, gets the grease. He was talking a ton. Stephon Diggs was talking a ton. Stephon Diggs didn't have as fortunate of a game. 3 receptions, 44 yards. Do you think that Diggs' time in Minnesota is completely done with, or do you think this is a salvageable situation for him?
Salvageable if they switch to 7 catches, 130 yards, and 2 touchdowns for Diggs next week. But it's 5 weeks now where Diggs has been under 100 yards. He's had 100-yard game this year. He's already stated he's unhappy here. He said that there was truth to the rumors. He didn't actually come out and say that, hey, I want to be traded. And they don't want to throw the ball for some reason. They want to run the ball. I mean, when you have Dalvin Cook, one of the best running backs in the league, why would you want to throw the ball? Just ride his coattail in. But Kirk Cousins is only good against 500 and below teams anyway, so might as well run the ball.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he had with the Giants. Well, if Stephon Diggs is traded, where are some places you'd like to see him go?
I would love to see him with it's going to pain me to say this, but with the Patriots. He kind of would feel that Philip Dorsett's hurt. Antonio Brown would have filled that, over the top role. Let's see some other places that would be fun. Maybe Philly, but they would have way too many weapons. Maybe Green Bay. Green Bay could use him, but Green Bay doesn't really trade for players, and they're trying to establish the run more than throwing the ball.
I've heard my Niners thrown around, and for Stephon Diggs, that'd be good, but I don't see it being John Lynch's style in terms of how he runs the organization. I don't see him making a big trade for a wide receiver midseason. Granted, he made a decent trade for a quarterback midseason, but that was only because Belichick threw something right into his lap.
Yeah. Belichick was like, here, take this gift because you have a really good coach.
Yeah, and I just want to spite Robert Kraft. All right, on the Giants side of things, so probably one of the big takeaways from the weekend is Wayne Gallman left with a concussion. So luckily for them, they have a superhuman on their team that apparently travels to Wakanda in his spare time, because Saquon Barkley and his enormous, gigantic quads are going to be probably back on the field next week at this rate. He was seen jumping around, obviously, in practice the other day. If he does happen to miss next week, if the trainers do take him off the field, some people that got some work with Wayne Gallman out. Jonathan Hillman had 9 carries for 20 yards. Elijah Penny, whose name's kind of floated around fantasy football communities for the last couple of years, he had 3 carries for 15 yards. If Saquon can't make it and Gallman can make it, is it safe to say you're not starting any Giants running back?
No, and I would have a hard time starting Saquon next week anyway, just because they're playing on a short week against New England. Thursday night football, luckily this year the Thursday night games have been relatively decent, whereas in the past we've been in Jags Titans hell on Thursday nights.
Hey, the Jags weren't too bad on Thursday night themselves. We had Minshew Mania, at least against Tennessee, so there was something.
Yeah, it's just so I would have a hard time starting him anyway, but
yeah.
I mean, if he's going to Wakanda to recover, I might actually he went to Wakanda. Let's just throw him in
there. Some other notable stat lines I should point out. So Daniel Jones, 182 yards and a touchdown, 1 interception, came back to earth in a big way when you look at some of the targets he spread around. So Golden Tate in his first game back from suspension, 3 receptions, 13 yards. Wasn't really a big part of the offense. I don't know how much we really expected from him coming off of the suspension. And he hasn't obviously gotten a lot of work with Daniel Jones because probably in OTAs and training camp, he was mostly working with Eli Manning. So Golden Tate, do you think this is a situation where he can bounce back to what we expect from him? Or do you think that his lack of reps with Daniel Jones is going to at least hinder him for the next foreseeable future?
Again, same thing with Tate as Saquon. I probably wouldn't have played him this week. I probably wouldn't have played him next week. But the third week in, with full weeks of practice with Daniel Jones, full reps with Daniel Jones, game reps with Daniel Jones, then I probably would put him in as like a flex option or something like that, just because he is such a yak monster, yards after catch, that he could take, those little crossing routes and just go to the house with them. So he has that pedigree to where until he proves otherwise, you probably should start him as a flex. But again, with these first 2 matchups against Minnesota's defense, which is pretty stout, and then New England's defense, which right now is best in the league. That's just because they haven't played anybody, but best in the league nonetheless.
Yeah.
I would have probably waited on him and then gone from there afterwards.
Yeah, the entire Giants offense I'm definitely fading next week, not just because it's New England, but also just in terms of what Belichick has done to rookie quarterbacks in his history.
Make them look foolish.
Yeah, makes them look foolish. Even sophomore quarterbacks like a Josh Allen look pretty bad against New England. So if you're under 25 and you're facing New England, it's not going to be a good day for you.
I think they had like one loss to an under 25 quarterback in like the last 5 or 6 years or something like that.
Yeah, even Patrick Mahomes is now 0-2 against them in his career. So probably break that streak this year. I'm rooting for it, but guess we'll see. All right. Next matchup up, not a lot of huge fantasy implications in this matchup, but Jets 6 points, lost to the Eagles 31. Probably the biggest takeaway I have from it is that the Eagles seem to be doubling down on the run game a little bit more. Carson Wentz only threw for 189 yards in this game. Granted, game script wise, he didn't have to throw a lot. They were up the entire matchup. They were up 14 points just after the first quarter. Jordan Howard, 13 carries, 62 yards. He had a touchdown coming off that big Thursday night game. I think that's a winning formula, though, for the Eagles to utilize the run a little bit more. They've tried to get a little bit too cute on offense, in my mind, with Carson Wentz. And when you have an MVP-level quarterback, I understand it. But Eagles passing game, where do you see this moving forward?
It's going to be pretty much how it's been for the first 5 weeks. It's going to be game script. I mean, heck, when you have 2 touchdowns from your defense, you really don't have to do much on offense. When you're playing a 5th-string quarterback in the Jets, you really don't need to do much, so you can rely a little bit more on the run game. But when they need to, they can open it up. And then when Deshaun Jackson comes back, it's just going to open up, 1, the run game a little bit more, and 2, Zach Ertz, so they'll open up a little bit more. You'll see, the game against Washington where he had 4 touchdowns or something like that, where they opened up the offense. But I hate this backfield. It's not a fun backfield, just because Jordan Howard, he looks like a good back, but Sanders looks like the better back. Yeah. He looks more elusive. He looks more explosive. He just looks better between the 20s, but then they trust Jordan Howard more from the 20s in. Mm-hmm. So it's just I'm holding on to Miles Sanders in one of my leagues because I'm like holding out hope for him, but it's getting to the point where I just might drop him.
It makes sense. Like if you just have him sitting around your roster, you can't wait for him to break out week after week. You have to trust what you're seeing. Eye test wise, he may be a little bit better than Jordan Howard to have a little bit more juice in those legs. But obviously, the way I see it, fantasy football is measured by 2 things, talent and opportunity. Right now, Jordan Howard has the opportunity. So I think he's probably a week after week running back 2 in your lineup, because might as well keep throwing him out there. I think the Eagles are going to keep giving him the run at this point. If you're looking at Zach Ertz, he did score a touchdown this week, so he did break a little bit of a slump he was in. 5 receptions, 57 yards. Lev Bell, as far as the Jets go, Lev Bell is probably the only one you're really keeping an eye on at this point. 15 carries, 43 yards, 7 receptions, so 22 touches altogether. Altogether, only match about for 15 points. PPR-wise, he's had 0 rushing touchdowns on the year, only 1 receiving touchdown. That was all the way back in week 1, so you definitely tell that Sam Darnold being out has hurt him. It's obviously hurt the entire wide receiving unit as Robbie Anderson's been down. Jamison Crowder hasn't had anything since that huge week 1. So this offense is predicated on Sam Darnold's health at this point.
Yeah, once Sam Darnold comes back from kissing all these girls or doing whatever he was doing, all your Jets players are going to go back to where they were week 1. Lev Bell's going to, go back in. Probably not RB1, but RB2 for sure. Robbie Anderson's going to be more boom and bust than he is just bust now. And then Jamison Crowder is going to have 14 catches again every week.
Yeah, I should talk about that. So in week 2 of your podcast here, I remember I was getting ripped because I listened back to that audio between you and Dre. Don't think I don't listen, man. Nah, so I knew all along that Sam Darnold
was going to get mono.
Handsome New York quarterback, has all the girls on him, that big contract. It was just a matter of time before he got some kind of STD. I just didn't realize it was going to be something so lame like mono.
Yeah, so when the news came out that he had, they didn't say mono. They just said mononucleosis. And I'm thinking to myself, is that mono? So my mom's a nurse. So I called her and I was like, is mononucleosis mono? And she's like, yeah, why? I'm like, can you get it at 23? She's like, why? Do you have it? I'm like, no. Sam Darnold has it. What? Like, I thought mono was just for teenagers. So, like, I was so mind blown that he got mono that even my brain was like, no, there's no way he got mono at 23.
Did you think it was like chicken pox, like something you just don't get as an adult?
Yeah, I was just like my brain knew exactly what it was, but my brain didn't know what it was because I'm just like, wait, he got what?
I've had a few friends in college that had it, so I've seen it. Can be a bit of a drag on you, but still, it's just so funny because you've never seen this affliction to any quarterback or high-profile athlete that I've known in years past. Or if you have, I'm sure the team didn't disclose it in the way that they had to with Sam.
Yeah, but he has probably one of the all-time greatest quotes now where he says that he wants to play, but he just doesn't want to die.
I mean, behind some of these offensive lines in the league, that's a concern whether you're off the field or on the field sometimes. There's been a bevy of bad offensive line play.
Yeah.
All right. Well, from a beatdown to a beatdown, basically, because we're going into the Patriots, Redskins. Actually, so two AFC, NFC East beatdowns, I guess. Kind of interesting duality. But Patriots 33, Redskins 7. Is Gruden getting fired? Fantasy implications aside, is Gruden getting fired after this week? I feel it's kind of unfair because you know what you're getting into when you face the Patriots.
Snyder, probably not. He tends to hold on to coaches.
Does he? I'm surprised Gruden's lasted 6 years.
Yeah, but he also had Joe Gibbs through all of those terrible, terrible years.
But Gibbs also won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I'm just saying, though. His track record's not too good. I would love to see fresh blood in there, but
his track record's really not good when you consider that he forces all his coaches to draft whoever he wants to draft, because Dwayne Haskins put it out there that he doesn't believe that Gruden wanted to draft him. We saw these same kind of quotes when it came to Mike Shanahan and RG3. So the owner is not doing any favors. I don't want to go on a whole Redskins rant, but this organization is terrible.
Yeah, Jerry Jones Jr. wants to be his, judge, jury, and executioner like Jerry is. But, I mean, Haskins is going to get the start next week, whether Gruden likes it or not. And he might actually do really good just because of who they're playing. But, yeah, I would love to see somebody new in there. But the Redskins, they're terribly ran and probably won't happen.
Well, fantasy implications, I guess I should mention. So, obviously, they start Colt McCoy this week. Colt McCoy had about the week we would have expected. So, if Dwayne Haskins starts, is there anyone you want to bump up on that offense? I mean, Terry McLaurin's, been a pretty decent start more often than not. He only had 3 catches today, I think, for about 62 yards, if I'm off the top of my head. Average day with Colt McCoy, do you think with Dwayne Haskins, someone on that offense could step up?
I mean, yeah, he had 50 touchdowns in college last year, and he's a pocket passer. So he wants to stand in there and throw the ball. So McLaurin and Paul Richardson, I would definitely bump up. I might even bump up Chris Thompson, depending on check down wise, game script. But I would still, throw out Adrian Peterson. That's just a terrible, terrible, terrible. I don't know what the heck they're doing over there. He has 700 rushes for 18 yards a game or something like that.
Yeah.
So the 2 receivers in Richardson and McLaurin, I'd bump up a little bit, and then Chris Thompson might even make it into top 36.
They could be a little bit better down the stretch when we get Darius Geis back, hopefully healthy. Just throwing that name out there. Maybe people have already forgot about him. So if you want to get ahead on the waiver wire, maybe you start looking at Geis, especially if your league has an IR spot to stash him in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully, because Adrian Peterson is I toted him at the beginning of the season. I was like, these old guys are coming out to play, and then
he's done.
He's the only old guy that has – hell, even Jason Witten is running 5-yard button hooks all day long. And running 3 miles an hour to a touchdown. It's just Adrian Peterson does not look good. I don't know if it's the offensive line or if it's just him or.
Well, it's because that Jay Gruden doesn't want to run out of the I formation 50 times a game.
Adrian Peterson once. Yeah, that's ego.
All right. So moving off of the Redskins, I'm done with them. We don't need to talk about them until they start showing something. Sony Michel, 16 carries, 91 yards, and a touchdown. So a nice little bounce back game. This is the game you would have wanted if you took the risk and started Sony Michel against the Redskins like I did. I just couldn't pass up on this matchup when I looked at it. Week to week, it's still a tough proposition when you consider the Patriots. But do you think this is a sign of future things to come with Sony?
No, because you can never trust Bill Belichick with running backs ever. I started James White in a phenomenal matchup, and they throw to Brandon Bolden for the touchdown.
Yeah, Brandon Bolden, that guy just has stuck around for the last decade, I feel.
It's because he's an awesome special teams player, so they keep him on the roster, and then he gets to vulture 2 touchdowns 2 weeks in a row.
Hey,
so never trust Bill Belichick with freaking running backs in fantasy football. He hates fantasy football. That's it. He just hates fantasy football.
Well, he's kept Julian Edelman relevant. Edelman went off, had a nice little day himself. 8 catches, 110 yards, touchdown. Obviously, him and Tom Brady are just in sync. And then when he's healthy and on the field, Julian Edelman, he's a high-end wide receiver too. Maybe even back-end wide receiver 1 with how he's been performing.
Yeah, with him and then with Gronk, those were really the only 2 Patriots you could always, rely on. Week to week, Brady probably could rely on him more weeks than not. But Edelman, as long as he's healthy, I would always start him, whether it be in a flex or RB or wide receiver 2 slot. I started him and got rewarded, but then I started James White and didn't. So He hates fantasy running backs. That's all I can say.
He definitely does. So I think that's about it for that matchup. Do you have anything more on those guys?
Yeah, start all of the Patriots players again, even Brandon Bolden, I guess, because they play the Giants on a early week. So
you don't think Daniel Jones is going to have his Eli Manning moment and trump the Patriots?
That would be awesome because I want to see them go down because they're 5-0 and they haven't played anybody outside of Buffalo.
Well, we don't think the Patriots are going to go undefeated, so they will lose a game.
Will they? They play the AFC East.
They also play the Chiefs at some point during the year, so I think that they'll probably go down. I'm throwing it out there. Early prediction, whenever that comes up on the schedule. Anyway, the next matchup, so moving on from the close to 50-year-old quarterback, we have 2 young quarterbacks that are fighting to stay in their team starting lineup when their starters come back from injury. So Minshew Mania went on the road this week to face the Carolina Panthers and Kyle Allen. So a matchup of 2 90s-era expansion teams, so it was kind of neat to see these 2 teams hook up. DJ Chark was one of the big beneficiaries of the day, 8 receptions, 164 yards, and 2 touchdowns, 36 fantasy points. A little bit underrated in terms of obviously, we had a ton of great wide receiver performances today. DJ Chark was one of them. Leonard Fournette had another big day, 108 yards and a touchdown. He's a little bit more involved in the passing game, too, with Minshew out there. 4 receptions, 29 yards. I'm definitely going to be very interested to see what happens when Nick Foles comes back with that situation. Similarly, obviously, Kyle Allen is now 3-0. So you definitely and I have had exchanges on this subject with it. Can you realistically justify starting Cam at this point?
Now, probably not. But after the first week when they played Arizona and he had 4 touchdowns, I was like, he played Arizona. It's 1 game against Arizona. But now they're winning with him fumbling the ball twice. They're winning with him having a so-so day, 181 yards and a touchdown. So they're winning close games. They're winning blowouts. They're 3-0 with him, and they're 0-2 this year with Cam. Even last year before Cam got hurt, they went 6 weeks, 7 weeks with straight losses with him.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, your team is better without Cam and with Kyle Allen. So maybe I'm getting to your side of quarterback controversy.
When you look at the box score, yes, Kyle Allen's stats don't pop off the screen, but this offense definitely moves very well down the field with him. You had DJ Moore get a little bit more involved in the offense today. Curtis Samuel didn't have as big a day, but he has succeeded with Kyle Allen as the starter. And then, of course, Christian McCaffrey. Listen, you don't need us to tell you that Christian McCaffrey is a good running back and that you need to start him every week. But 176 rushing yards this week, 2 touchdowns in the passing game, 61 yards and a receiving touchdown, 3 touchdowns altogether for a grand whopping total, if you're in a standard PPR league, 47 fantasy points. This guy, my God.
I'm starting him on his bye week.
I don't even care that he left the game with cramps. I mean, obviously I understand that that's probably going to be a situation that, hey, eat a banana, you'll be fine. Drink some Gatorade, you'll be fine. But I should note that he did leave the game with that cramp, and his backup came into the game, Reggie Bonifan, 80-yard touchdown, or 80 yards and a touchdown. So something to keep in mind. Obviously, I pray to the Lord that Christian McCaffrey doesn't get hurt. I wish him nothing but the best health. But if he does, and if you're looking for a handcuff, that's who you would pursue in that situation.
Yeah, and he probably is getting a cramp because 2 weeks in a row, it has been the Christian McCaffrey versus the team he is playing. It's not even any of these other, Houston or Jacksonville. It's been Christian McCaffrey versus those two teams. He's, they were worried about him running between the tackles. I watched the highlight of his 88-yard run. Guess where it was? Between the tackles. So at the beginning of the year, they were saying that they needed to get in a bigger back for goal line situations and stuff like that. But Christian McCaffrey is running away with it. And please stay healthy because I have you on my family league, and I want to destroy my family more than my coworkers. So please stay healthy.
Aris, you don't need Christian McCaffrey to destroy a family. Alcohol usually does it.
Well.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So moving past that, well, I would say this. I've heard an interesting comparison for Christian McCaffrey. People are starting to throw out the name Marshall Faulk in comparison to him. And I got to say, I don't hate that comparison. He's certainly produced like it. So shout out Christian McCaffrey. Keep doing it, man.
Oh yeah, I'm voting for him to reach that 1,000-yard rushing, 1,000-yard receiving mark.
It's likely at this pace. Right now. All right. So next game, arguably the game of the week, depending on what side of the Cowboy hate spectrum you fall on. The Packers went on the road, underdogs, which kind of surprised me. They were almost a touchdown dog, but 34 at the Cowboys in Jerry World. Cowboys only put up 24. Dak Prescott, pretty bad day in terms of real life football. 3 interceptions, a lot of the game they were behind. But if you're in a fantasy league, he almost threw for 500 yards, so you can't hate on that. And most of those yards went to Amari Cooper. Cooper probably had the big – if it wasn't for Will Fuller existing, Cooper's day would have been the number 1 fantasy football line out there. So everyone outside of Will Fuller, Cooper was better than this week. 11 receptions, 226 yards, and a score. Big 50-yard touchdown in garbage time. Guy's a stud. When he's not playing Marshawn Lattimore, he produces. What do you make of the Cowboys' offense?
It's kind of a puzzle. I mean, they're open. They're throwing the ball more. Dak looks really good in spots. Amari Cooper is starting to get his. Gallup is starting to get his. So Kellen Moore is showing that he can be a offensive coordinator in this league. He might even get, maybe not this year, but the following offseason, if this continues, he might get a opportunity to head coach a football team.
I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being the head coach of the Cowboys.
Oh, you think they'll fire
How much time do you think Garrett has left?
quite a bit because he's
Really?
a puppet. Yeah, he's a puppet.
If he
Jerry.
If he doesn't win a playoff game, I think he's gone. Just
It
public sentiment.
doesn't matter because Jerry is the coach of that team. He just needs a clapping, gum-chewing guy on the sideline to look like he's coaching.
And that's why I throw out the name Kellen Moore, because he's at least been in that system for years. So if they do fire Garrett, it would be an easy transition for them. Obviously, you can at least justify that Kellen Moore and Dak Prescott have a great relationship together. I think he would be the easy fix rather than, let's say, they did fire him and try to bring in someone outside of the organization, like a Lincoln Riley, or let's say a Mike Tomlin if he loses his job out there in Pittsburgh. I think that Kellen Moore would be an easy person to supplement in there if Jason Garrett did get fired.
Yeah, as long as they're, willing to secede a lot of power for their own team to Jerry Jones. Like, I don't think Tomlin is ever going to do that because Tomlin is, he wants to have control where Jerry wants to have control. He won't give that control to the to the coach. So if Kellen can play ball with Jerry, yeah, I can see that. But I still think they want that, gum chewing, hand clapping guy on the sideline. Just good job, guys. That's what they want. So I don't think he's on the hot seat. He's only won one playoff game in his tenure.
Yeah, I just think that these 2 straight weeks of losing to winning teams is going to hurt his job security a little bit. On the Packers side of things, so it begins and ends with Aaron Jones, 107 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns. You talk about doubling down on the running game. I think the Packers may have found their formula because when you look at the other Aaron on that offense, only 238 passing yards and 0 touchdowns, less than 10 points from Aaron Rodgers. Did we see this when this year started?
No, I still thought they would probably be more 50-50. But even last week when they played who the hell did they play? Philly. When they played Philly last week, Aaron Rodgers threw the ball. He almost had, 500 yards passing last week. He had a couple touchdowns.
And one big interception at the end.
That interception, 1, probably pass interference. 2, receiver, you kind of got to help your guy out. So deflections, you can't really put on quarterback. But, I mean, you're at the 1-yard line. You have Aaron Jones, who already had a 1-yard touchdown in that game. Maybe don't pull a Seahawks and throw the ball 4 times in a row. But also Jimmy Graham, catch the ball with 2 hands, not try to get these highlight reel 1-hand catches in the back of the end zone. And, they probably would have won. So
Whoa. Jimmy Graham played basketball. If you didn't hear them say it on the broadcast 1,000 times. He played basketball.
I understand, but you're playing football now. Catch the ball with 2 hands. Pull a Jason Witten, catch the ball with 2 hands, and fall down.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I guess that brings the question here. So are we at the point where we're benching Aaron Rodgers?
He's still so good that
he's good in ability, but we're talking about fantasy football here. Are you benching him? Because 10 points isn't going to cut it in most matchups.
No, I still think he's matchup dependent because there's going to be those weeks maybe where they're down and he has to throw the ball. And he could still put up 30 points, 40 points on you. It's just you're going to be up and down every week. So it's probably going to be more matchup dependent than a week-to-week starter like he used to be.
I just feel the last couple of years with Aaron Rodgers, and I reflected this too in when I was kind of previewing the Packers as a whole. He hasn't really been a great fantasy quarterback the last couple of years. I don't remember the last 40-point game that Aaron Rodgers has put up.
Probably with Jordy.
Yeah, so maybe that has something to do with it. And then obviously, I should say Devontae Adams was out of this game, so that is, if anything was going to hurt him, that's probably why they've used the run game more than anything. So monitor Devontae Adams' health in the next few weeks, and that might be dependent on whether or not you start Aaron Rodgers in your respective matchups.
Yeah. I think you were the one that said it on one of the other podcasts that if Aaron Rodgers could throw to Devontae Adams 30 times a game, he would.
Yeah, he's pretty much reflected that in some of his quotes he's put out there.
So, yeah, with his top guy out, usually with your top guy out, the quarterbacks tend to have a slightly less productive day. But, I mean, heck, if they, instead of running the ball like they did this week and threw the ball one of those 2 times and had, 1 or 2 touchdowns, you might have had a decent fantasy day.
Of course, because no one really stood up in that wide receiving unit. Aaron Jones also led this team in receiving. He had 75 yards through the air. But behind him, you had Jimmy Graham, 41 yards. Geronimo Allison only put up 28. Valdez-Scantling only caught 1 ball. So not a lot of support, you can say, in the passing game as well. Throw in the fact they were up in this game, so they didn't really necessarily have to throw the ball.
Yeah, game script.
All right. Well, all right. Let's close out the NFC. Just a quick preview for Monday night. So Browns at the Niners. What are you kind of looking forward to in this game?
Fantasy-wise, I really want them to – the Browns, that is, to kind of rely more on that run game because it seemed to open up everything else once they started to rely on the run game more with Chubb than throwing the ball with Baker, even though Baker I still feel is a baller. And then I kind of want to see if the Niners are actually for real. Like, I'm still on the fence about your Niners. Like,
yeah,
I want to believe in them, but they're just so
I agree.
hard.
I'm still waiting for that Jimmy Garoppolo breakout week. I will counter what you're saying a little bit because if you're going to beat the Niners on defense, you're going to beat them through the air, if anything. They take advantage of that secondary because that front 7 is legit. They are really putting it to these teams. So I think Nick Chubb, I'd be a little bit worried if you're going into Monday night with a deficit.
Yeah, that's me you're talking about. I have a 20 or 19-point deficit with Nick Chubb. So
that's why.
Go Nick Chubb. But no, I still think that the Browns offense runs better off of that play action. So
I agree.
Early and often, and I think you're in a good spot against that Niners defense.
Yeah, I'm just saying that it's hard to really get any momentum going on the ground with the Browns, with the run game against the Niners. So ideally, if you have, I think where you're going to be able to exploit them is going to be over the middle. So Jarvis Landry might have a bit of a big week. Odell deep, half the time he's going to be on Richard Sherman's side of the ball. Richard Sherman still is a decent cornerback. So I guess we'll see. Those are just some things to keep in mind if you're listening to this before the Monday night game.